Will you mind if you pray for us?
He's on mute.
He's on mute. Oh no. Okay.
Okay, can go ahead and pray?
Okay, fine. Thank you, brother.
Good morning, colleagues. Shall we pray? Father, we bless you. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the gift of life, oh God. Even as we are about to start this meeting, deliberating on issues that affect our region, that affect the nations, that affect the world at large, we invite your presence. Touch our minds made of clay. Touch our hearts made of clay. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. As we start off, I'll just have to say that we are multinationals here. We have people from across Africa. We have the representative from Mozambique, Eswatini, South Africa. Kenya forms but the highest the majority. And yes, with the speakers, I'll just turn it over to Jones to introduce them before we start off. Jones.
Yeah, thank you very much, Boniface. Before we start, are you able to maybe give the guests a snapshot of the composition, a rough composition of the audience, the rough, say, of the organizations they represent and so on? Give us at least a bigger picture.
We're so wide the sample from the presidential elections. Maybe will I really request everyone to say our
No, not everyone, but just to mention some of the
overview.
Yeah.
Here we are, but the composition is so much diverse. We have the public service, we have the private sector, we have even some people from, I can just mention, from the local county governments. We have people from the national government, like people from the presidential archives are represented here. We have people from the ministries, the public universities, like I come from a private university. I come from the USIU. We have the faculty members, we have people that works in the banks and so on. So it's quite a diverse group of people and very different mindsets. And again, we have also the directors from the national archives of the various countries, like the person who has the trade, I think is the national director of the 13 national archives. So it's such a diverse group.
Yeah, thank you very much, Boniface. And just a brief mission or objective for KAMA for the guests to have a clue.
Our mission is to ensure that we advance the records and archives management within Kenya and even abroad. And also we really want to empower our members, because the records and archives management is not so much grown in the sub-Saharan Africa. So we as Kenyans, we want to really to advocate for it. And as you can see, there's an association in South Africa called SASA. SASA is very vibrant, and we also want to be as vibrant as SASA.
All right.
And maybe I can ask. I can also allow the Secretary General for KAMA also to add on something like that. Collins.
Thank you so much, Boniface. Just to add on that, I can give a brief about the membership base. We have close to 750 members who are registered in the association, and then we have our chairperson, who is Dr. Cleophas Ambira, the patron, Professor Jassa from Kwaya. I think all of us could be knowing him. And we have also some committees in the association which handle quite a number of things. We have education committee chaired by Mika. We have welfare committee, project committee, and marketing committee. That's just a brief about the association.
Yeah, just also to add on that, our person who is Cleophas Ambira, I think was elected one of the representatives of the Anglo-African in the ICA Secretariat. So he represents us also in the ICA and also in charge of the Anglo-speaking countries within Africa.
Lovely.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Boniface. Now, introducing also the guests from Encompass, who is going to take the lead?
I'm happy to, David. Hi, everyone. I'm Cass Bissett. I'm a technology evangelist for Encompass. I spend a lot of time thinking about strategy, where the marketplace is going, analysts, and also working with organisations internationally to innovate and change the way we think about records and information management. So I'm very pleased to be joining you all today from the other side of the world. And David, I think you're off mute now, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Cass. Thanks, Jones, for giving us the opportunity. My name is David Gould, and I'm about to join Encompass to run the American and European and African area business for us. I have freshly left an 11-year career that started at Hewlett Packard. If you look behind me, there's Hewlett and Packard behind me, and ran the records management business for HP, which later became Hewlett Packard Enterprises and then was acquired by Micro Focus. And I left Micro Focus in the end of September, and I'll be joining officially Encompass in the next week or so. So I'm very happy to be here. I've worked with Jones for a very, very long time, probably going back to 2010. So I think he was one of the first customers I met when I did my first European trip. So we've had a good business relationship and friendship for a long period of time. I've known Cass for many years too. She's been a customer, and now soon will become a work colleague. And then we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Baldwin, and you can give a quick pitch, and then we can get to the business at hand here. So thank you, team, the Karma Group. I appreciate your attendance today.
Yes, my name is John Baldwin. I'd like to also echo what David said. Appreciate you all listening in today. I've been at Encompass about 19, 20 months, almost 2 years. And I worked earlier on helping ramp the company up from a financial standpoint, and now working with David here in the US and the EMEA regions to really ramp out what you're about to see. So that's about as short as I can make it. So there you go.
Jones, I might start then. I'll share my screen, and please do, if people want to stop and talk along the way, we've got a little bit of time to do that. So don't be shy putting your hand up and jumping in if you'd like to. What I've tried to do for this session is to really focus in on things that are changing in the way people are thinking about this space, how we're thinking about helping staff, what's changing from a technology perspective, and then what we have to prepare ourselves for. So I welcome your comments along the way. And I just wanted to start with really an idea of what's going on internally for a lot of organisations. We've got a huge amount of change going on. So for almost every organisation, we've got a significant transformation project. The business is using lots of different capabilities that, 10 or 15 years ago, we never really had on the agenda. And there's a significant change in watchdog activity. And that's a lot to do with regulation, legislation, things like privacy changes and international laws that we have to be aware of when we're operating. So there's a lot going on. We're finding organisations are really strapped for resources as well. So we're not getting the people we used to have. There's a lot of change fatigue feeling in the organisation. So when we think about what we're preparing for, and if we look at where we are now, you know, even in the last 5 years, the amount of data that we've had to manage and look after has grown significantly. And this is based on Deloitte research, but any of the research houses that you look at will present a similar view. And, you know, back when we all kind of started working back here, there wasn't a whole lot to worry about. You know, we had a shared drive, a bit of email, a couple of critical business systems. Sorry, did someone want to speak? No, we're okay. So there wasn't a lot to worry about back here, but if we kind of think about what we're going to have to solve in the next 5 years, the amount of growth that we're going to be expecting with content and information that we look after is significant. And what we've found internationally is the strategies that have gotten us to this point today just aren't going to scale. They're already struggling, and we're really going to have to think of a different plan moving forward. When we look at that idea of data and what information we're having to manage, for most organisations, about 10 to 20% of the information that they look after will be structured. And that's our kind of traditional data heavy systems like, you know, payroll, our customer relation systems, ERP and so on. And about kind of 80 to 90% of what we look after really is unstructured. That's all of the documents we create and receive. It's the email and intranet, our social content that we look after. So this kind of structured data side got a lot of attention. You will have all heard a lot of PR around things like big data, data analytics, robotic process automation, and so on. But our back office, which is largely this unstructured side, really hasn't had a lot of attention given to it. And we're really now struggling with the lack of innovation in that area. What it feels like for staff is that if you said to a colleague, go and find that report from that meeting 2 months ago, they would really struggle to find the answer quickly. So they might look in the shared drive. It might be in email. It might be in SharePoint. It could be in a business system. It might be now in Teams, in the Microsoft suite. So there's lots of places for us to go and look and hunt around, this kind of hunter-gatherer feeling, like we're always trying to search for things. It's not easy to get to things. And all the while, the organisation should have a governance plan to manage that, to know we're protecting our high-risk content, to know that we've got governance in place and a plan for lifecycle management to meet our obligations. So I think the converse of that, that user experience, or for staff, is really when we look at the research that organisations are putting out there. So this is based on some Gartner research. And at the beginning of 2017, Michael Woodbridge, who's one of Gartner's key analysts, came out and said in a rather provocative blog that enterprise content management is dead and long live this idea of content services. And content services was really a culmination of strategic thinking and technology and process, where we want to be able to have a way that people can work natively in their business systems, and that we can leverage content, reuse it, manage it across its life cycle in the native sources, without having to think of getting everything into a central record keeping system or moving content into a central place for it to be safe and managed. And I think that there's quite a lot of available information on this content services research. If you've spent time looking at it, you'll be very familiar with these ideas. But I think some of the big changes that had happened with that research was, instead of the old enterprise content management magic quadrant, which is how we'd thought of technology in this space, things started to really change to content services. But for a lot of organisations who started using Microsoft, there's been a lot of discussion in-house. If we're moving towards Microsoft as being a front end for our staff, what do we do with all of our other business systems? How do we flow between our traditional on-premise line of business systems and what's in the cloud? How are we going to evolve? How are we going to work going forward? So there's been a lot of thinking in this area, a lot of, I guess, disruption for people's strategies. And I presume that's something that you're all thinking of at the moment internally, and how you move forward. I think particularly there's some really good research around this idea of federation and managing content in place, being able to look after it, discover it, protect it wherever it may exist. And then really the idea of kind of convergence, where systems and the requirements that we want to get from systems is blurring a bit. You know, technology is maturing. You can do lots of different jobs out of platforms. So there's quite a bit of change going on in the way we want to consume information and in the ways we can protect it going forward. So I won't spend a whole lot more time on this, but happy to provide extra information here. But I think these are the kind of three key areas that we're having to think about how we manage. Firstly, our business systems and applications where people are in creating content, doing updates, you know, to cases and so on. That's our traditional line of business systems. And then we've got our old, you know, legacy side of things, our old shared drives, our old document management systems and so on. And then we've got the active spots where people are creating content all the time, like where they're collaborating and generating new ideas, working on projects and so on. So really this idea is to think about, well, how do we have a flow that works across these states, across these different territories of our information? And that's an idea that we're very much focused on with our platform. So for a lot of organisations, there's a different level of priority or a critical driver right now. For some, cleaning up that kind of zombie system mode where we're keeping the lights on because we don't know what to do with information with old shared drives, that might be a key priority. For others, working through this COVID situation, getting a governance and risk plan around systems like Teams and Zoom and so on, our other collaboration platforms has been critical. And then we have sites in the middle that are really starting to edge towards, you know, using cloud platforms, but not sure how they're going to work with the systems back on premise, what they're going to do from a records management perspective. And each of you will have a different feeling on your priority, what's critical to you, what you're focused on. But all of these have, you know, a governance backbone that is a focus for the technology that's supporting. I'll just pause there if there's any discussion that you'd like to have before we press on.
Yeah, carry on, Cass. I think
no problems,
let me see. I'll follow up. Is there any questions?
Thank you. So the real focus for us when we're thinking about how we have that federated management is to help staff work natively in the business systems that they need to use to generate their work, to collaborate and so on, and just work there. And then really behind the scenes have a process where we're able to help our records managers and our key information managers really govern and put that kind of security wrapper, the governance wrapper around all of the systems that staff are using without people having to remember to go and save things in the central record keeping system. So this is an idea where we have a central approach to how we care for our information, and we wrap that around all of the business systems and repositories that staff are working in across the organisation. So we're going to take a look at that today, and I'm just going to show you a simple scenario where we're creating content in an area of Teams. We're going to create a meeting minute. And what we're really focused on in this scenario is that staff just have a native experience. They just work in Teams, create their content, but that governance layer is happening automatically behind the scenes. We're using strategies of machine learning to be able to find and identify documents and items and properly classify them and put that records retention around them without staff having to be aware of that. And I think if all of you have been through the processes of trying to get new staff onboarded, trying to get them to understand how you look after records internally, what to do, where to file things, how to catalogue those items, the metadata to fill in, there's a lot to do that in those traditional mindsets or the traditional capabilities that we had. We're really trying to automate that and move away from staff having to manually catalogue things. So I'll jump across and we'll take a look. And we'll just step through that scenario where I'm in Teams. So for any of you that haven't used Microsoft Teams, it's just a really simple kind of collaboration approach where we can create documents and simultaneously author documents together. And I'm just going to work in a general area and create our meeting minutes in November. It is the 6th for me today. So I'm just going to pop a title in meeting minutes. And we'll create that document. So however your process is to kick off document creations, nothing changes. You just follow the process that you've set internally. And just so that you don't have to all watch me type, which is very painful, I assure you. I'm just going to do a quick update here and then move my screen, then we're done. So staff will really just work with the native systems that they're given to do their work, and that's it. If you do anything extra here and have extra metadata fields where you want people to put, updates in or particular milestones that are important to your other reporting processes and so on, no problem at all. We can take advantage of that data, but it's not mandatory. It's not prerequisite to using the capability. We're going to come over to Encompass now to have a look, and this is our federated way of providing that records and compliance governance across the systems that we have connected to. And in my environment, you can see I've got a file share here, I've got SharePoint and Teams. So I'm really today very much in this console as a records manager. This is not an end user application. So this is for your core subject matter experts, core individuals that look after records and compliance and governance across the organisation. But we can start to get a sense of what these systems look like. And if I come into something like SharePoint, we can immediately see from SharePoint the structure and start to get a sense of what's going on in that system. And everything at the top of the bubble chart here, you can see is where staff are actively creating content. And the bigger the bubble, the more content there is. So not surprisingly, IT is a big creator of content. We can see they've got a big bubble there. We can see there's some smaller sites here, the admin and so on, that people are creating content. Sorry, and down the bottom of the chart, we can also see that these are sites that haven't been updated for some time. So back in 2017 was the last time this Parasite had an update. That might be an area that we want to put some attention to when we've got capacity and see, can we retire that content? Can we classify it and sentence it? Or is that team now working somewhere else? Should we think about relocating their content to a more active work area? But a big part of what we're focusing on is to help give visibility back to the records team or the individuals that do that compliance role so that you can see what's going on and start making decisions as to how to manage that information. When we start using classification techniques, there's some really neat things that we can start focusing on. So for example, in my data, I've got a focus on traffic restrictions and things that are going on with our local planning around traffic. And I can filter in on those categories in my content to see exactly where that information is stored. And we can see almost all of it is in the traffic management site, which makes a lot of sense because it's about traffic planning. But we can see we've also got this tiny little bubble out here in the administration area that actually that content shouldn't be there at all. It should be over in traffic. And when we filter in, we can see the administration department largely has created that content, as well as one in finance. And it's really Visaro as a key creator of that content. So really quickly, we can get a sense of what's going on, and that might be fine. It might be totally okay that that content exists in the administration site. But if this was really high risk, or high value content to your organisation, you might want to have a policy behind the scenes that automatically relocates that content to where it should be, so that it's not left exposed in the wrong area and not meeting your governance plans. So our dashboards and visualizations are really key to helping build knowledge and help support decision making in how you care for your information. but also how you might want to sit down with different business groups in your organisation to show them this is what's happening, this is where you're creating information. Here's some ways that we can help you to reduce the burden on the information management role in your group. So if we come back to our top level, I'm just going to drill in to see what's been created today, and we'll just take a look. There's our 6th meeting minute that we created just before. Everything in the system that we're connected to, we can preview, so we don't have to go away or go back to the source system to see the item. Please excuse me, I'm having a few internet issues at this end. So we can take a look at the document, and we also get a full view of the metadata of the item as well. And in my process, what I've done behind the scenes is had a policy running looking for meeting minutes. So as we've created that minute in the Teams area of finance, we've used a machine learning process to go and identify that that was a meeting minute, and the service was 70% confident that that was the case. But we've also gone and classified the content as well under the business classification scheme, which really automatically provides the governance and the record keeping preservation life cycle in place without anyone having to do something. So staff weren't aware of it, they just created their meeting minute, but the system has detected that minute and determined what needs to be done from a retention perspective. And finally, if we have a look at our repository, we can see exactly where that item's located in Teams. We can see all of the metadata that's available to us that we can now search against and report on, and so forth. So how we get that kind of end state automated for us, we're doing a couple of things behind the scenes. The file plan, which is the traditional business classification scheme, you might call it a taxonomy, is really that kind of structured view of how the organisation thinks about records, the business function, the activities that are created, and the transactions that occur. And we can see with financial management, for example, under routine operations, if we have a look at those items, regardless of where they've been created in the repositories, we get an organised view of those activities, which when you think about the limited structure we would see in things like a shared drive or limited setups in areas like Teams and SharePoint, where they don't have that idea of the business function and the activity, we've been able to generate that view for the records team to think about how they see the records that are due for sentencing, but how they can also search and retire questions like information requests, audits, and other activities that go on in the business. And how we get that organised view is really leveraging policies. Policies help us initially can classify things. They can also guide business processes, like what happens when we look after a certain lot of content. How do we think about caring for that information? What should go on? How do we identify and manage it? So policies are very visual. It's very obvious what's going on. They're not a coding type thing. You don't need to be a techo. They're just a way of describing what should happen with information over its life cycle. So I'll just pause there. If there's anything that people want to kind of drill into in a little bit more, I'm very happy to do that. I'm conscious of the time, Jones, because I know that we only had about 20 minutes.
No, you're fine. You're fine. You can still proceed them all along. There's a question from Shadrach Katu. There are two Shadrachs. One is Kyoko. Kyoko is asking whether can the system be used as an e-meeting platform? I think perhaps you can clarify a little bit more on that question.
So not from a meeting perspective. What the system's really designed to do is to govern your repositories internally and provide that central way of overseeing what goes on with your records and your information. So it's certainly not a collaboration tool. We're really just harnessing the strategies of collaboration that you have in other business systems, enabling people to work there safely, but knowing that everything that they create in those collaboration systems is governed, is protected, is available from a central search perspective with security.
Yeah,
Thanks, Joe.
very good. And Shadrach Katu is asking, for organizations that have structured taxonomies, can the content manager be populated with the taxonomy or file plan? I think you just talked about taxonomy and file plan, but also try to address this question a bit more.
Sure. So really that file plan view for us can be synchronized through, if you're already running a system like Content Manager, we can pull the structured file plan from Content Manager and synchronize it in. But we also ship a range of core standard file plans for government, for banking, and for pharmaceuticals as well. But you can create and load up a plan. It's just a CSV file that we load in. So if you've got a documented file plan that you use internally, you can load that directly in here, or manually create it if you needed to. So that file plan is just that organized way of saying, this is how our organization thinks about information. This is what we need to manage for our risk or governance plans. And then the goal with the system is really to help get content into those organized areas. And we do that with policies or by manually classifying if you needed to.
Good. There's a follow-up question also. Is the tool limited only to the Office 365 ecosystem, or will it work with the older technologies, older Microsoft technologies, since not all the institutions have moved to Office 365 and some have no APIs, Microsoft?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a really good question. So we provision the platform on Azure, but we have a connective framework that allows us to talk to things like your on-premise shared drives. And we're connecting through to, say, traditional enterprise content management systems like Content Manager with that. We're also just about to release a REST-based connector, which is like a generic connector for you to reach into those other business systems, but they do need to be able to accept a web service call, which means, you know, they need to have some awareness of kind of that web-based service architecture. So it is a RESTful process, very secure to do that, and you can configure your own. So if you've got a very specific niche system that you're operating, so long as it can accept a web service call, you can leverage the REST connector.
Yeah, and that covers for the question that follows, which talks about maybe connecting to any existing ERPs.
That's right. And that's exactly why we're releasing that REST connector, because not everyone runs SAP or Oracle. You know, there is such a broad variance on what people are operating internationally. So that REST-based connector allows us to handle the interactions with those systems in a normalized way, which means you can write one policy that can then connect to multiple business systems. I guess just to show that, I'll just scoot through just to give you a visual to help explain that. So for example, if we were thinking about an invoice, invoices might be generated out of a number of different systems like, you know, Xero, Salesforce, SAP, and so forth. When we think about the way our connectors have to work, for those of you that have done traditional integration projects, they're really heavy. You have to do a point-to-point system, direct integration. If one system changes, you have to recompile the code and test it. What we've done with our connector strategy is say that this is a loosely coupled process. So we use a technology strategy called equivalency, which helps us talk really easily to those native systems. It means you don't need direct system coding, and the connector then helps us say, Well, in Salesforce, we call an invoice ID number. In SAP, it's invoice transaction. In Xero, it's invoice ID number. Well, we can now make one policy work because we know that the ID is the ID and everything else is normalized to that data model so that the policy will work no matter where that content's come from, no matter which business system that you're connecting into. So that's really important for sustainability. You want to be able to have a strategy that you know we can write something once and get a huge amount of economy out of it, not have to write 20 things because we have, 20 core business systems. Thanks, James.
Yeah, there's one last question on it. Let's follow up. Now, we have still many institutions that are still having hard copy records. How do you handle this, or what strategies would you use to put in place? I've just rephrased that question.
So I think there's a couple of things. Like for us, we delayed releasing a physical records management capability until late next year because we weren't sure whether people wanted it. There had been, I guess, almost every organisation has a process now or a policy now. What we're finding is there's still a big appetite to think about, how to handle physical information. So we are in the second half of next year releasing a physical records management. I think in between, we're seeing some blended choices. Some people are choosing to use the records capability in SharePoint, which is quite limited. I think if you have to do remote census or do barcode wanding with big stores off-site, that's really problematic. So our plan is to release a physical management capability in the second half of next year. But we still see a lot of activity with people using off-site storage like Iron Mountain and Grace Records and so on. So there's very varying maturity in this space, very varying requirements and goals. In some countries, digitization has been really critical. They're scanning and converting a lot of those physical stores to electronic versions, but it costs a lot of money to do that. So I think just depending on what your plan is, you could continue using a physical record system that you have today, and then just still transition with this model to federate your information for electronic management, or know that in the future we will be releasing a physical records capability.
Yeah, so Cass, what you're saying is that really it doesn't really matter what system they're using to manage their physical records. If you can access it, you can create an oversight layer over it.
That's exactly right. So our first release of that was with Content Manager, the old Trim or Records Manager system from Micro And then just depending on what it is, like, some sites that I talk to are using Excel, which, they don't have big collections, but they've got an Excel spreadsheet for each department's records or their different repositories. Like, it's really problematic over time to get a lot of value out of that strategy, but it is a plan. And then other people have implemented, those big ECM systems as well. There's still potential to get value out of those with this strategy. So you can extend what you've spent with the ECM or your traditional record keeping system, and then extend out with this federated model and operating the two in tandem. That's exactly right.
Okay, carry on.
I think probably the last thing that I did want to just run you through is more of a strategy around machine learning and how we think about leveraging this technology. And there's very varying grades of experience with these technologies in the marketplace. Some organizations are just starting to use the technology. Some have been using different automation strategies for some years. So just to give you a sense of where we're really thinking about leveraging it, and I'll just use the example of a contract because you all know what they look like. But if we had to go and find all of our contracts at the moment because we're trying to check our language on force majeure, which is very popular right now with COVID going on. we would ask staff to go and rustle up their contracts, because almost no organisations have a central contracts management system. So we would go and pull them together, and we'd go and look in the document to find specific phrases, specific clauses, specific values and so on that we're looking for. And in this example, what we're really trying to do is replace that manual effort with a machine learning layer that goes and finds those answers or insights for us. So we might use different services for different jobs. So for example, if we were looking at images, we might use an image recognition service. And a lot of you will have this experience. When you look through a shared drive, there are heaps of image files that are labeled really poorly. Some of them are numbered, some of them might have the camera or the device with a number after them, but they almost never have been converted with proper titles or metadata and so on. So the machine learning services now for image recognition are so good, they're so cheap that you can consider using those, particularly where you're finding your high value assets might be across your repositories. That we might also use a machine learning service to go and look for those clauses and those key items or artifacts within a document. So what we're really looking to do is not run that for everything. Like what we want to do is say, look, go and find contracts. And when we find a contract and we were 80% sure that it was a contract, then run that through a machine learning service to find all those extra values and that extra detail that we want that's specific to contracts, because they're very different documents than an application, for example, which is structured data, very easy to get answers out of structured data tables and forms and so on. But when documents can be unstructured and have a lot of variability to them, we need to use different strategies to automate that insight. So really what we're trying to do is go through the document and find these core areas that we consider to be valuable for that process. And once we use a service to do that, we can then consider, say for the legal team, well, here's all of the areas of risk that were exposed in the contracts. Now you can consider then passing that data off to a workflow tool. Sorry, I'm still not used to writing on a screen. Or, to think about, what you do with that data. So workflow might be one answer, but you might also want to do some reporting, for example, just to look at where you need to think about contracts that are coming up for renewal, contracts that are coming up for termination and so on. And you may think about doing that through a different app experience, like a really simple interface to help the legal team go through contracts, find clauses that they want to reuse, and, filter on things like, which vendor do we have contracts over $1 million, for example. So really thinking about how we start to extract or get data out of those critical documents that the organisation looks after or generates. You wouldn't do this for everything, but for your high value or high risk documents, it makes a lot of sense to think about automating that metadata. Firstly, finding them. We know this is all of our contracts. We know these are all our contracts across the organisation. We've found them. We've got them managed. Now we've got the data about them as well, and we can think about leveraging that going forward. So that was really a high level view of what I wanted to share with you today. There's a lot changing in this field. I think from where we used to have to think about manually filling in metadata, remembering to save our records in the right spot. This is really about protecting the organisation's goals and governance obligations and having a strategy that isn't just relying on people doing the right thing, which has run out of puff. There's a lot of change in the way we consider transparency obligations now, even our risk if you're in banking or pharmaceuticals by not having appropriate governance in place. We can lose our licenses to operate. We have really big fines, and particularly with areas of privacy starting to impact how we look after information, what we do with information, how we protect the individual's rights as well. There's a lot of change going on here. So starting to think about a plan to automate this is becoming important for a lot of organisations.
Fantastic, very good. We have a question also from Shadrach Katu. Some institutions are particularly sensitive about limiting access privileges for their staff because of the sensitivity of the content they handle, e.g. in government departments such as defense or intelligence. how do you manage your role assignment access? Using Active Directory framework or something else?
Exactly right. Spot on. We do leverage Azure Active Directory, and it's privileged access to Encompass. So you might only have 2 or 3 people in your organization that access the dashboards that I showed you. They're fully audited as well. So someone has to have access turned on to Encompass, and they have to be part of your Azure Active Directory. So all of the two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication that you operate with Azure Active Directory is in place with Encompass as well. So then we've got our roles that then give permissions or privileges for those individuals that have access to Encompass to be able to operate that federated governance model. And additionally, you've got opportunities to exclude content. So clearly you're making decisions what you connect to, but also if you're connecting to SharePoint or Teams, for example, you can exclude different sites. So if you didn't want to include highly sensitive executive sites in this process, you can exclude them. But a really important area, that integrity and trust is a critical aspect of our product design.
Excellent. I would like to grab somebody, actually, Willie. Is Willie online still? Now,
Yes, I'm online.
yes, I've put you on the spot primarily because in the response to what Cas has just presented,
Yes.
want to turn it the other way around. You've experienced working throughout the pandemic period. And
Yes.
how has that been challenging, and has that really changed the way that you look at the traditional way that you've been managing records before?
Yes, so much has happened, but now again, when managing records in a purely manual system, it's extremely tricky. I think the only different thing that we've done is trying to sanitize the records, and the other challenge is now managing records that come from virtual meetings. I'm yet to see how we'll manage to capture that, given that now working from government side, there's usually a lot of responsibility bestowed on us in terms of accountability, integrity, and expectations even for the residents that we serve. So those are some of the headaches we are still having. I've not found any solutions yet. And that is one of the reasons why now listening from those who are doing something different will help us know how to go about everything.
So for you, you still have to scuttle yourself, running to the offices to find the records that you need to serve the officers with, isn't it?
Yes, sadly so.
Yeah. But at the same time, they are working remotely, or you have a hybrid system of working?
No. Most of us are still going to the office. We, like Boniface had said in the morning, the only guys who are, I would say, are working remotely are the ones who are older than 58 years. The rest of us are still going to the offices. But when it comes to meetings, especially in the county assembly side, they are doing their meetings virtually via Zoom.
And how is the record keeping done via Zoom at the moment?
Ouch.
How is the record keeping done in those instances? How is the record keeping done in those instances where virtual meetings are being performed?
Yeah, in the county assembly, what I've gathered, they mostly just upload them in PDF. I mean, they have on their website. There's no particular system to capture it in a way that now it will be transitioned. When the systems change, it will be transitioned with the changes and all.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question because when we're presenting the brief to the Encompass team, it was very clear that many of our institutions are in different stages of evolution. Some are still really heavily on the paper, and others are transitioning. Others are thinking of moving to an EDMS system or an ERDMS system. Others are in the process of managing that implementation. So there's a mix of really statuses within the group here. Now, is there anyone who is in the middle of implementing a system, a records keeping or a document management system, and is having the same challenges during this period and can respond to CAS situation? Maybe you can raise, if you know how to raise a hand on the chat, that would be fantastic. Oh, that was a quick raise. Let me pick on somebody. Katu, you are Shadrach. You had specified some things. What's the context of your question? Were you looking at in your organization? Are you in the process of implementing? Have you implemented an EDMS system, or where are you? Shadrach Katu. Hope you're not. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe let me also help you there.
Yes, go on first. Go ahead.
I've seen somebody. Julius Sugut. I noted they're working on a certain ERP project.
Ah, fantastic.
Julie, will you say something? Sugut? Maybe you can help us here. Sugut. Okay, I saw her online.
Yes, Sugut. Unless she's having. Yes, she's connecting to audio.
Okay.
Okay, try to ask her again.
Sugut, are you there? Because I know they're working on a certain ERP. Maybe your response will be very Sugut. Okay, I think she has not connected to the audio.
Okay.
Maybe you can go back to Shadrach then.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I can see Sugut is still struggling to connect. Shadrach, not Shadrach, Boniface, and while Sugut is still, what about our friends from across the, from abroad?
Yeah, very right. Maybe
give them opportunity to ask a question.
Yeah, C4. C4.
That's the nature of the virtual meetings. So you have to chase people.
You have to chase people. Ngobas, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there, Boniface.
Okay.
Yes. Give us your experience if you are using any ERP, anything in this time of COVID. Are you facing any challenges and so on?
All right. Greetings, everybody. I was hoping Mr. Sipho was in the meeting. One of the officers responsible for systems at the Eswatini National Archives. Okay, we are currently working on implementing an EDRMS, even though we do face some challenges with getting people to enroll in the system and also use the system. I'm not sure about experiences from colleagues, but people always feel comfortable with using legacy systems. For instance, even manual systems in records management. They prefer using those rather than using the automated EDRMS, which we have put in place. Other than that, during the pandemic period, we were busy with the normal way of doing things after the lockdown was alleviated in our country. In our country, we just use the normal way of sending correspondence and receiving correspondence, which is the physical format of writing memorandums, minutes, and letters. That's where we are at. We are hoping that starting from this week, we talk to our permanent secretary not to accept anything that has been submitted using the physical copies. So we are hoping that directors and heads of departments will start using the system. One other challenge that we face mainly is the technical support of the system. We have a bureau, computer bureau, that supports government with electronic systems. However, for some reason, they were not directly involved during system development process with the consultant. That is the actual coding and everything. So there is a feeling that they do not own the system and that they may not understand some components that would assist them in supporting the system. So when we face some glitches, we do have those, a few challenges that we come across. Yeah, maybe let me just end there, Boniface.
That's very well.
Thank you very much. Cass, is there any matter from that response that you like to maybe add on to something?
Look, I think in my region that leveraging an enterprise content management system is very well trodden ground. Like a lot of our government sites got funding about 20 years ago to start implementing those systems. So the challenges that you describe are very real to a lot of departments over here, but internationally, they're very similar problems that we all struggle with, which is how do we get people on? How do we get them to use things? It's thinking about policies and procedures that help support that. So I think you will have success with things like, getting sign-offs. If people don't get things electronically routed or sent with links, they're not going to get them signed off. Therefore, all of that starts to help, create the need to get content into those systems. But I think one of the big pressure points that's changing that for organisations is as soon as you start using more software as a service capabilities, which is the way the trends are going with the kind of capabilities that organisations are leveraging as they're thinking about upgrading, like even the big ERP providers like SAP are going fully cloud-based and fully software as a service. it starts to get really problematic because we don't have access to the back end of those systems in the same way that we would have integrated in the past. So making sure that you don't get stuck with a technology lock-in where you've got all this tech debt with traditional integrations, or where you get orphaned off with a system that can't communicate with the new capabilities that the business want to leverage at a cheaper price. Part of that strategy and thinking is something that we're really seeing a lot more effort go into at the moment. It's not just about our platform, but just the reality of how technology is being delivered now. So the benefits of SaaS, you know, they're evergreen, you don't have to update them, but you also don't have the same control over the back end. And that's why that federated strategy really gives you a lot of flexibility to move forward at the right pace, but also to interact with the systems that your business are choosing to operate. And that's starting to change a lot more rapidly. So, you know, I completely feel, you know, someone who spent 20 years, more than 20 years in this space myself, I completely feel those pain points. They are really problematic to overcome. And that's why we've really looked at innovating with different approaches so that you're not stuck with asking people, you know, to do the right thing and not stuck with those support issues with IT.
Right. Thank you very much. Fantastic. So I will just move ahead now to do a small recap and also present the context of where we are. I will share my screen a little bit. Thank you very much, Cass. I think you can see my screen. Can you see a presentation? Side also, Cass.
There you go.
Just a minute. I think I have.
I can see your recap now.
Okay, Boniface, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can still hear you.
All right, and you can see the slide clear?
Yes.
Fantastic. So thank you very much. Looking at what Cass from Encompass team has presented to us, I think this is so much in line with the discussions that we've been having over the year, as we've been having these Kama Knowledge Cafes on a monthly basis. We started off, of course, looking at the aspects of business analysis, looking at the technology blueprinting, which we started touching on last month. And we still have some ways to go. We have the roadmap on the project planning to discuss, followed by aspects and different approaches for designing of RIM systems, and then the implementation and improvement. So this presentation that really Cass has given us is also adding a little bit of credence to what we've been sharing over the past months, that things are not working the way we expect them to be. We know for certain through the pandemic period has also showed us that we need a new way of thinking. And I'm very happy because most of our institutions are the very, very early stages. So this is the right time to really rethink on how to envision technology in the area of records and information management. So we are much better off than those organizations that are really far advanced. I can give you an example where I am practicing a lot of the International Criminal Court, which I might say is really advanced when it uses technology for records and information management. But at the same time, there's that pain that I'm feeling in that over the years, we've gotten stuck with the traditional means, in the traditional way of looking at records and information management technology. And this is already starting to bite us even right now in the pandemic period. So I think for many of our African institutions, I think we are now better off during this period. This is the time to rethink, to reimagine what kind of technology going forward, what approaches or philosophy going forward would be appropriate for us. And CAS has painted a picture of a possible vision. So I think that really opens a big discussion going forward in your institutions. I think what she's also pointed out is that there's a lot of things we need to look at, basically looking at new paradigms, new ways of how information is registered. I think you're already experiencing that yourself. You are seeing virtual meetings, Zoom meetings coming in, minutes of meetings coming from different modes of creation. Classification system has to change. Access and security is a big issue. So all the traditional way that which we look, the way we manage the life cycle of information is changing. And I think it requires a completely different approach. And of course, now we've been given a picture of what a new vision will look like. Basically, we are coming back to what we discussed a few months ago, that users prefer to use their own systems, or the systems that they are most familiar with, or the methods they are most familiar with. It's very, very difficult nowadays to force everyone into a centralized, say, records management system, for example, solution. It's very, very difficult to imagine a scenario where you want to go back to centralization of all records. It's almost impossible. And again, while that used to be a story a few years back, now the pandemic has shown us that, hey, it is now a reality. The other thing that is very interesting that has, of course, come up from this presentation is that our roles as records and information managers is changing. We are moving from just being the keepers of the physical records. We're actually moving to being those that provide oversight, advice, and governance at a holistic level. So to do that, we need new skills, we need new tools, we need new technology. And this is a good example of a future that we are embracing. So I think this is a fantastic teeing off into the whole discussion of that Encompass has given us. And I think we're very grateful because you've shown us really how to look at the future, You've shown us also how to imagine what is coming. And I think this is the inspiration that many of us in this forum actually need. We need to say that there is hope. We are not just stuck in our traditional means. There is hope. And that hope is coming from a way of rethinking, a changing our mindset, changing the way we've been trained. We've been trained to think in a traditional way, but now the world is forcing us to actually look at things differently. So I'm very, very happy to have had the opportunity to sit in this forum today. I'm particularly excited that also the Encompass team and right. Am I back, Boniface?
Yes, you are now,
Yes,
James.
you are. You're
Okay,
back.
where did you lose me?
You were saying, Jones, that you're particularly excited about the Encompass team, and that's when you kind of disappeared.
Right. Yes. So, yeah, I'm back. Yeah. So I'm really excited about the Encompass team and really being used as a tool for us this morning to envision the future. And this is the essence of where we wanted to arrive at. So if I can get perhaps a word from the Encompass team and then back to you, Boniface. Either
If you
David.
can.
Yeah.
Pardon?
either a comment from David or somebody from the Encompass team about the session, and then I will take it back to you, Boniface.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd just offer that, first of all, I thought the questions were really, really good. I appreciate that very high level of engagement, you know, with the number of comments in the chat screen was fantastic. You know, a lot of the issues that you raise are not particular necessarily to where you are in the world. We see this in other parts of the world as well. You know, the digital transformation age is really having probably its greatest impact on physical records, yet physical records still probably, as of a couple of years ago, comprise 30 to 40% of all total records. So there's still a lot of physical records out there. We see organizations in very important industries such as pharmaceutical, financial services still dealing with lots of physical records that have to be maintained for regulatory and also knowledge management purposes. So some of the issues that you've surfaced during the conversation, especially after Cass's presentation, I thought were very, very pertinent. And I think we could probably provide through Joan some strategies for you to deal with this short term, and then clearly long term. I think the Encompass platform will be a great solution for you. But overall, the level of engagement tonight, Jones, was really fantastic. These were hardcore, really important questions that were asked. So I'm actually getting really good karma from this karma organizations because I actually wanted to use that line the whole night, so I finally had the chance to do it. But I really appreciate the very high level of engagement from the entire group of participants. It's really been fantastic. I've learned a lot, you know, and some of the issues that you've raised are some things that we're going to have to think about as well. So thank you very much for your comments, your candor, and your very, very high level of engagement.
Thank you, David. Boniface, up to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And also have to thank everyone. But before I say anything, I'll introduce our person. I think he has joined us, Cleophas Ambira. Maybe also say something. Cleophas.
Yes, I'm just trying to get my video on. So you can hear me, Boniface?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for plugging in. Sorry, I've been double hunting on two meetings, so I missed a good bit of this. I think just to thank you, Dr. Jones, for the session, and also our guest speakers today, Cass, David, and Baldwin, joining us for this team. I'm sure Boniface did indicate that we are a professional association based here in Kenya and really committed to just sort of anchoring our footprint in records and information management and being at the heart of all the sustainable development conversations from that angle for our country. One of the things that Jones has done for us in the recent months is really just to challenge us and awaken us and just show us how records information management is intellectually stimulating, it's technically demanding, and it's not what for a long time we have made it believe it is. And for us, they have reminded us, for those of us who are heading records information management, that we are now clear that just not anyone can work in records and information management. You want to have the right people in it and able to articulate the kind of things we've been sharing. So we're also grateful, Jones, for really making the sacrifices and coming through for the team. Cass and team, thank you so much. We look forward for continuous collaboration. Really, there's so much we need to do this part of the world in this area. We're clearly not doing very well in terms of digital presence. The countries, the economies are moving faster than the profession is moving, right? And that's why you hear Billy saying we are doing remote work, but how are we managing records out of these remote engagements? So the world has already moved to remote. The records people, we are still asking questions. Now that means we have a bit of short time to step up the game and step it very fast. And so we will need you, Carson, David, and Baldwin, and of course, Jones, to just continue supporting us and helping us build our capability. I think COVID has been an interesting phenomenon. It's been a crisis, but I think to the rest of the professionals, we should not waste a crisis. You don't waste a good crisis. And this has been a moment for us to showcase the significance of records and information professionals. I think if we don't seize the moment and demonstrate that, we'll of course have ourselves to blame for a long time, because the world will move on and they'll realize they can move on without us. So the burden is on us to demonstrate what is our value add, position that value, and tap into the experts like Jones, Cass, and the rest, just build that capability and just see how to move forward. So thank you so much, team, for plugging in. But please, let's take these conversations into practical. We are doing a lot of these trainings. We hope we manage to translate them. Last week, I was attending a session by Dr. Katu, and there's one thing he said, that technology doesn't solve solutions. It helps to solve the solutions. And that, I think, what Jones has been emphasizing over time. So we must get the right frame, the right thinking to know what it helps us solve the problems, so that we use technology to help us solve our problems. Technology in itself will not solve the problem. So we need to have the right mindset and the right perspective of things. Yeah, so much for that for today. Thank you so much, Jones. Thank you, Cass and team, for joining us for the sacrifice. I don't know the time difference between where you are and here. I know some of these countries we can be hours and hours apart, but we don't take it for granted. We really can't thank you guys enough for just coming through and supporting, and looking forward for continuous engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Terry. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Ambira. Dr. Ambira is our tech here person, is the tech Armach here person. For those that maybe he didn't say that, he's our boss, he's our head. Now, I know after this, there's also another webinar by Shadrach at 2. Maybe Shadrach, will you just give us an overview, maybe in 1 minute before we close? Katu?
Katu seems to have already left. He should have started his session.
Okay.
Something.
Okay. Thank you so much, all the team from Encompass, led by Cass, David, and Dr. Jones. This was very nice. This conversation is not ending here. We are having our last conversation, I think, in December, December 4th. So we'll still to continue with this conversation that we started until December. So again, we welcome you again on that time of December. Maybe again you can say something, at least so that we learn things during this pandemic. There are so much uncertainties. Things have changed. Our roles need to be redefined. We need to learn some new aspects. We need to learn how to do other things. So we just have to have this conversation day in, day out. I also have to thank all the participants. Those are from Kenya. Those are from Eswatini. Those are from Botswana, Mozambique, and South Africa. Thank you, everyone, so much. Now, I'll ask one person to give us, to just close it out of the prayer. I don't know who should do that. I don't know who has been really touched so much, just to say a word before we close. Let me just pinpoint anyone. Sefo, are you there?
For left.
For left, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw Shadrach's mic on, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, maybe Shadrach Kioko can close with the word of prayer. Shadrach.
Okay.
Okay, let us pray. Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, we thank you for this day. We also thank you for our facilitators, Dr. Jones, Kaz, and the others. Thank you for giving them wisdom to give us the kind of knowledge which we have been yearning for. We continue praying for Kalma. Always be there for us. In Jesus' name I pray and believe. Amen.
Okay, I think people can live at their own pleasure. Thank you so much for participating, and thanks so much, presenter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And see you next time.
Okay, thanks.